Hello, thank you so much for joining us. I'm Joshua Peguero here with Channel A at Education Station. One of the things that we always hear about from our viewers that they care about the most, even when we talk to viewers and have these surveys and groups, and one of the things they mention is student safety. And so I'm joined here by Lieutenant Brian Zink. The CCSD PD, they're the ones watching over your children when they're in school. So we want to thank you, Lieutenant Zink. Later on, we're going to talk with Lieutenant Michael Campbell, who deals with traffic. But thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. Thanks for having us. Really look forward to talking about all the great things that CCSD and CCSD PD are doing to keep our kids safe.
So we're going to start with that. Just what are you seeing this year in terms of student behaviors?
It's always a mixed bag. Just when we think things are going good, something will happen. But I mean, overall, I think a lot of our statistics are down this year as far as the student behavior on campus. I know a lot of schools have added additional staff to help guide the kids into making better decisions and choices while on property. And I just really think that us being out there in the community and then working with our community partners is really making a very positive change.
And I know we were talking about this before. I've talked about this before with you. Is efforts what you try to do as an agency to try to break that barrier. And I want you to explain it between like the perception students may have or children may have about the police department. So can you describe some of those efforts?
Yeah. So definitely, it's a very unique situation that we have here because probably half of our students have grown up with CCSD in their schools. And then we have all these other kids coming from all over the country, all over the world, and they're going into a school system where there are police officers stationed at the high schools and then officers that come to the middle schools and elementary schools to deal with situations. So we find that it's a very unique blend that we're very happy to be here for. And I think that the more the kids see our officers or other law enforcement agencies on campus in a positive manner, just really helps them and makes them feel safe. Generally, we only respond to some schools when we have to, but then at the high schools where we have officers who work there Monday through Friday, the kids really get to know them, and we've definitely found that them being there really makes a huge difference. And then likewise, having our K-9 team come through just to stop in and visit at all the schools definitely makes a positive interaction with us in the community we serve.
What does that do for the perception that students, being able to have a relationship with an officer, especially when you're starting in middle school, what does that do to the perception of a child when he sees this positive interaction with a cop?
We know that them seeing our officers there in a positive light definitely helps build that relationship with the law enforcement officer so that if the child ever needs help, they feel comfortable going and talking to the cop. Because the last thing we want is for one of our officers to be walking through a school and the initial thought of anybody is like, oh God, what happened? Why are they here? Oh, somebody got in trouble or somebody's going to go to jail or something like that. And typically that's far from the truth. That our officers spend more time on the campus just being present, having that positive presence on our campus, which we know helps deter bad things from happening. And so I think that the more time we spend there, the better. And then, through some of our educational programs that we do now, like the Rocket Rules program, which is elementary based, and then our LEADS program, which is in the middle school, kids get to see our officers a lot more in more positive light.
And I know I was going to ask you about the LEADS program. Can you just tell our audience a little bit more about it?
Yeah, so the LEADS program, it's law enforcement against drugs, and it goes into much more positive life choices. And what we do is we have officers that go through an accreditation process where they learn how to teach the LEADS program, which is all funded through an organization called the Mendez program, or organization. So all the information and the educational stuff that our officers teach is vetted. And what they do is then they'll go in and they'll teach a 9-week course in a middle school to kids 1 hour a week, and then they interact with the kids, and then they have a graduation at the end, and then we try to get our officers in as many middle schools as we possibly can.
Because right now the way it works is that just for our audience who isn't aware, there's CCSD PD officers are stationed at all high schools, but when it comes to middle schools and elementary schools, I know currently right now there isn't an officer there permanently, right?
We have a few middle school officers that are at the tail end of a grant that we got from the federal government, and they were hired, trained, and then specifically assigned to middle schools for 3 years. And like I said, that grant is slowly, it's got to its to the end. And so this school year, we'll have a few people that'll finish out that grant. And then after that, they'll just go on to regular patrol. But then again, we still encourage our officers to spend time at the middle schools. Many of our patrol officers actually have offices that they set up on middle school campuses so that they're constantly around.
Wow. Okay, so now we're gonna take a quick commercial break, but after that, we're gonna talk about efforts that CCSD PD has been doing to just continue capturing firearms, and they're also going to talk about from students some advice that they have for parents. So that's going to be coming up next after this break. Okay, welcome back to Education Station. I'm Joshua Figueroa, and I'm joined here with Lieutenant Brian Zink of the Clark County School District Police Department. Lieutenant Zink, so just talk to me about the efforts to confiscate guns and weapons on campus.
Yeah, so every year this is a problem because, one firearm on any campus is one too many. And so continually throughout the year, we combat this issue in several different ways. One, our officers are always vigilant on the campus looking for people who don't belong there. CCSD has made some fantastic strides in keeping our campuses safe by single points of entry, requiring students to wear their lanyards with their student ID on it so that they're easily recognized. Campus security monitors out on carts patrolling the property, making sure people aren't coming in and off property or coming in the parking lot and hanging out and things like that. So there's that too. Then we do have our canine team. Several of our canine are trained to sniff out firearms. Others are trained to sniff out narcotics. And so what they'll do is they'll do what we call random sniffs. CCSD will generate a list of schools, classrooms, times. Then our officers will go there with their canine, and then they'll have all the kids leave the classroom. They'll run the dog through the classroom. The students leave their bags, and then the dogs go in, the dogs come out. And then also CCSD has their random program. Same thing. It's an arrival program where CCSD Emergency Management will set up, work with staff and our officers, and then they'll just pick like every 5th or 10th student at a certain school walking in, and then they'll walk through the metal detector. And then again, that's there to prevent weapons from coming on campus. And again, in both of those situations, we've had instances where students have seen what they're about to walk into, and then they'll try to hide or ditch something, and that's recovered and taken out of their hands. So and honestly, then it's just reminding parents that if you hear something, your child does something, you see something online, you can report it to us either through your school or through Safe Voice. And then a majority of the weapons that we do confiscate on our campuses are discovered because a student hears about it, sees it in a bathroom, goes and tells a trusted adult who either contacts the school or contacts us, and we safely remove those firearms from our campuses.
And that's also why it's important to have a relationship with students as officers.
Absolutely, yeah. Many of the students from the weapons that we've confiscated will come up and tell the officer because they see that officer on the campus all the time, and then they know that they're there to keep them safe.
And you were telling me when it comes to parents as well, what can they do as parents to make sure that their guns are protected, but also what happens after when the gun is stolen?
Yeah, so unfortunately, we know that a lot of the firearms that are stolen in the Valley are just because people don't secure them in their homes. They think that they need to have that easy access in their bedside table, right under their mattress or something like that. And so that's where somebody breaking into your house, those are the first places that they're going to go and look. Or another problem we have is when people leave them unsecure in their car, in their driveway. They might set it in their center console. They might leave it in a backpack in the front seat of their car. They forget to lock their door. And we all know that people walk through neighborhoods here all the time checking handles. And if the door opens, they're just going to grab whatever they can see. They may not know that they're stealing a gun until they get somewhere else. But then ultimately those guns end up on campus. And the big problem with that too is that so many people, because we don't have to register firearms here, they don't ever write down their serial number. They don't take pictures of it. They don't know the make, model, the caliber of their firearms. And so if these weapons are taken and they end up on our campus and we recover them, we run it, it comes back no record, we don't know. We don't know where it came from. So if you're going to be we just ask to be a responsible gun owner, know what you have, know where it is, know that serial number so that you can report it stolen, so that if it does turn up, we recover it. Ultimately, you're going to get it back. And then, a lot of these firearms cost, lots and lots of money. So it's just like, we just ask everybody, please be responsible. Don't think because you tell your kid not to go in your bedside table, they're going to get a whooping, that they're going to listen to you. Wow. Kids are curious. They're going to do things they want to do.
So I reported before on the gang problem at certain high schools. One was at a legacy high school, at least last school year. I'm not sure what it is this school year, but In terms of tackling that, what is CCSD PD doing to address the gang issue?
We have a very robust and active gang unit, if you want to call it that. We have several people within our department that are attached to Metro's gang unit. We have somebody who's attached to Metro's juvenile crime group, and they constantly are working with these outside agencies to either we get a lot of information that they need, and then likewise they get a lot of information that we need that they share back and forth with us. And then all of us on our department, we get these briefings talking about gang activity, who to look for, new gangs that are popping up all over the valley. And then so many of our officers on our campuses just take it upon themselves to educate themselves on gangs, start surveilling the gangs on their campuses, and then sharing this information. So they're a very good network of people within the valley, law enforcement, civilian, that share this information. So I mean, definitely our department does a huge part, a lot of work to make sure that that information is shared and that our officers are aware, which ultimately makes safer campuses.
And this is where it comes to having relationships with different jurisdictions, which is key for CCSD.
Absolutely. The relationships that we have with all the other agencies in the Valley, almost 23 years here now in my career, is completely different than it used to be back when I started as a campus officer. You would try to push information up and never really know if it went anywhere, but now we know that information is constantly shared with everyone in the local community. And then there's so many different opportunities for officers to take additional gang training through other agencies, the different groups that come into town and educate our officers on things. It's a great thing, and we really try to share that information with everybody as much as possible.
Fascinating stuff. Thank you so much, Lieutenant
Thanks.
Brian Zink. Next, we're going to be joined by Lieutenant Brian Campbell. Michael Campbell, Brian Zink. But Lieutenant Michael Campbell is going to talk with us about traffic safety in your schools. School zone. So we'll be right back after this quick break. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Joshua Piguero, and we're going to continue our conversation with the Clark County School District Police. And right now, joining me is Lieutenant Michael Campbell. Thank you so much. He oversees traffic. And so we're going to start. How has the driving behavior been so far this school year?
Yeah, so, I mean, in comparison to last year, the year before, the behaviors that we see aren't much different. Either people don't know or don't care. It's usually those two categories. We still have people that are having a hard time understanding that there's no U-turns in active school zones, even though that's been a law for almost 10 years now. But the flip side of things is that with all these new e-devices, a lot of the injuries and collisions involving our students has skyrocketed.
So I'm glad you segued into that conversation. So talk to us about that, because it's like, now it seems, parents are buying their kids these sort of electric devices, and they're not even wearing helmets.
Right. Yeah, I think for a lot of the parents, because this technology is so new, that they don't know what they're buying. I mean, they think it's a harmless e-scooter or e-bicycle, when in reality, they're not fitting the criteria of the law. The laws have caught up in the last couple of years, including that helmet law, where in the county, the city of Las Vegas, and even in North Las Vegas and Henderson, they're about to roll out or recently have laws that require anybody that's under the age of 18 that's riding one of those e-devices to have a helmet. And it's not just any helmet that we're asking them to wear. It's not a bicycle helmet that when you're going 10 or 15 miles an hour, even though the law prohibits a lot of these devices from going certain speeds. For instance, a e-scooter can't go over 15 miles per hour on any street, sidewalk, bike path, where the bicycles, they can assist you up to 28 miles per hour, meaning that you have to be able to spin your legs, spin the pedals. So the biggest thing that we're asking parents to look at is how fast can these devices go, because it's hard. It gets confusing when you say, hey, it can't be over 750 watts of power and things like that. But if it can go 40, 50 miles an hour, that's not a bicycle anymore. That's not a scooter. That's a motorcycle. So we're treating those more powerful devices as motorcycles, because those high-powered, high-speed devices are the ones that are predominantly involved in these motor vehicle crashes.
And so when you mean treat it as a motorcycle, what is that? What does that mean? What does that look like for CCSD PD? Does it mean that now you will, if a traffic officer will pull over a student if they see that he's going too fast or she's going too fast?
Right. So it's going to depend on the circumstances is what's going to dictate the officer's response. If someone is driving a scooter, it's hard to tell what's what when you're just seeing somebody ride by, especially if they're abiding by the law. They're riding in the street. That means that they have to abide by all the same rules and regulations that a motor vehicle does. So I try to remind people and make it simple that if you're going to be on the sidewalk, you act like a pedestrian. And if you're in the street, you have to act like a car. And if you go back and forth between the two of them, that's where you start to make that recipe of disaster where you're going to end up in a crash, because predictability is one of the biggest things that we press upon all road users is don't do anything that people don't think that you're not going to do. You know, like if you're going to be riding down the roadway, you got to look for those vehicles. You got to be predictable so you don't just do a U-turn in front of cars or go out into the travel lanes or ride on the wrong side of the road. So that's the biggest thing that we're trying to ask is not only to know what they're buying them, is to know these rules and regulations out there on the road to keep them safe.
When would you say that your officers have started noticing this uptake of e-scooters and e-bikes among students? Would you say like the last 2 years, 3 years, or was it this school year?
I would say last year we started seeing some events happening, but they just didn't gain that popularity that we're seeing until the end of last school year, and it really took off this year, and it's a great mode of transportation for kids. As long as they charge the device, it gets them where they're going. Pretty safe if you're following the rules. There's nothing wrong with buying your kid one. It would just knowing which ones are the safe ones, which ones are legal within the terms of Nevada revised statute, city ordinances, county ordinances. But yeah, it took off this year. And to get back to your last question is like, what would our officers do? If they're riding a device recklessly, if they're being unsafe through our school zones and it could hurt somebody or themselves, we're going to try to stop them. We're going to try to make contact. And yeah, the vehicle could be towed. The rider or driver could be cited. The parents can be cited for allowing them to operate that. You could be cited for not having a motorcycle license, for not registering a vehicle, for not having insurance, for not wearing a helmet. So there's a lot of things that have been added to the law lately, and just because we add them to the law doesn't mean people are going to follow them. But we're really hopeful that with all the education, the partnerships with the community and our other police departments, and all the information that we've put out and spread through the community over the past year, can make a difference, because we've had over 300 kids hit by cars, and about half of those were riding e-devices.
All right, we're going to continue this conversation with Lieutenant Campbell right after this quick break. Please keep it here on Channel 8. Welcome back to Education Station. I'm Joshua Peguero. So we're going to continue this conversation with Lieutenant Michael Campbell of the Clark County School District Police Department. So tell us how this year so far, how many kids, so from August to April, how many kids have been hit by vehicles?
So as of last week, it was 322 students that we've identified. The criteria, while it's kind of difficult to identify when a kid is on his way to and from school, so we generally look at between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. 6 a.m. as early as those kids are going to high schools or to their bus stops. Some of them are even earlier, but we haven't seen any happening before 6 a.m. yet. And 6 p.m. because there's so many different after-school activities. And that kind of lends to the NRS changing coming this July, where it'll allow school zones to be longer, where they can be used for other activities, things of that nature. Our statistics really helped out with that. But yeah, it's about 322 students as of last week. It's going to go up. The weather's nice, and when it's nice, kids are out and they're having fun. They're doing kid things. Last year we were at about 120. Year before that, I think it was 89. So while we're out there, we're doing more. We have more people within traffic. We're doing everything that we can, thinking outside the box. We're doing bicycle safety things. We're doing partnerships with Safe Routes. We're doing red curb projects where we go to schools and paint the red curbs, where we volunteer time with the students and the staff. I mean, there's nothing that I think we're not doing. Manpower is always going to be an issue. So we try to do as much as we can, where we can and when we can. But the officers are out there every day. Lieutenant Zink mentioned earlier where we have everybody in the school zones. We have everybody at the schools. You'll see a traffic officer at schools every day, but there's 8 of them. There's a sergeant and myself, so there's 10 total. And with the patrol guys and gals and the campus helping out, I mean, you're going to have people everywhere doing what they can. When calls for service aren't pending, emergencies aren't happening, everybody's in those school zones. Everybody's looking for everybody's kids because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get them to school safe so they can have a great education, great day, get them back home at the end of the night so they can be in that chair eating dinner with their parents, et cetera. But, yeah, we take it personal when somebody gets hurt, when a kid gets hurt. I mean, because I just want to be able to do more. I take it very seriously. I have kids in the school district myself. My wife works for the school district, so it's like a family type setting for us. And, you know, we're just going to keep doing what we can. But, you know, when it comes down to it, we can't really find a reason in the statistics to blame the kids or blame the drivers because it's 50-50. It's mostly high school kids now getting hit.
Okay.
I think about 140, some of those 322 are high school related. And I think it could help out with having those extra crossing guards that they're trying to push for at the high schools. But, you know, we would think that high school kids would be able to take care of themselves, look out for themselves. But, I mean, again, when we were kids, looking for cars was basic, you know, something that we were taught, and they're taught still. But, I mean, there's a lot on their minds when you're a high school kid. And their face is always down in their phone. So, I mean, if they could put their phone in their pocket or just put it down when they're getting close to that crosswalk or walking down the street or coming off the bus, because if we all took our own safety into our own hands and we are all accountable for our own safety, I would think that probably at least 2/3 of these incidents would go away.
Wow.
But, you know, here we are, and we're trying our best to just educate. And when we can't educate, we're out there enforcing the traffic laws every single day. You know, and my team out there on the motorcycles every single day, no matter the weather, they're in those school zones making sure that your kids are safe.
Gee. And how many fatalities have you had this school year so far?
We've had 6 related to being on the way to or from school. And again, that's a loose term. I mean, they could be on their way home and they're going through some subdivision, or they stopped at the store, or it's very difficult for us to track exactly that they're on their way to and from, but we're doing our best, and we're working with our law enforcement partners to try to identify those kids as students, so we can get the education where it needs to be, and the funding, if there's any grants available, et cetera, to certain parts of the town to do more enforcement or education.
Well, I want to thank Clark County School District Police Department Lieutenant Michael Campbell and Lieutenant Brian Zink for coming on and having this wonderful conversation. Thank you both for taking time, you know, because there's so many important things that y'all do in protecting children. You know, it's the 5th largest school district in the country. You know, so I'm sure that you officers sometimes feel very stretched because of how large the school system is, but we are very grateful for you all. So thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, and thank you all for watching. That was Education Station conversation with Lieutenant Michael Campbell and Lieutenant Brian Zink on how they're protecting your children. Have a great night.